In this clip we're going to look at the production of a souffle and the food science that accompanies it. There are many variations on a souffle, but essentially they are a base product that has the addition of a meringue added to them. These bases can be comprised of products such as creme pâtissière, bechamel, or even something as simple as a fruit puree. It's the addition of the meringue to these base products and the placing of this mixture into a baking dish and baking in the oven that makes a souffle a souffle. So if we look at this diagram here from Harold McGee's book, we can see from a food science point of view what's actually occurring during the baking process. The small dots in the base of the ramekin there indicate the air which is incorporated into the base mixture through the meringue. The second picture indicates what happens once we place the souffle into the oven. Effectively, the heat causes the gases to expand and the water to vaporize into steam, so that the bubbles expand and rise the mixture. During this process, this is where the souffle takes on the traditional souffle appearance by rising above the ramekin and setting. Now once the souffle is cooked, it's normally removed from the oven and served at once. This is because once it's actually been cooked, the cooling causes the gas bubbles to contract and some of the steam to condense again back into liquid. So in effect, what happens is the souffle starts to shrink and contract. So let's look at this in practice. The following clip is going to show the production of an orange or Grand Marnier flavoured souffle. It's going to show the theory and the practice integrated together in the production of a souffle.
Orange souffle. A souffle is a dessert that's cooked to order and usually contains egg whites. Its main ingredients are flour and butter, milk, fresh egg, a little bit of sugar and some kind of flavouring, in this case orange. We start the process by melting a little bit of butter, and also while that's melting we need to grate the zest of one orange. The zest will be used to flavour the souffle later on. Orange zest has a lot of flavour in it and is often used. Notice we've got a little bit of greaseproof paper over the grater there. That just helps capture the little bits of orange zest. We also need to scald some milk and place the butter back on. The remaining butter is then used to line, or the butter is used to line the moulds of a souffle dish. We need to give it a good even sort of thickish coating in order for the souffle to rise evenly later on. That's really important. We then place them in the fridge and allow the butter to set. About 10 minutes should be suffice. We then take them out and again brush them with some more butter. Reasonably thick here. Once we've brushed them, we then dip them into some caster sugar and shake off any excess sugar that there might be there, and repeat the process again with the other mould. This creates sort of a non-stick effect and allows the souffle to rise up nice and even when we cook it later on. It also helps for a little bit of crusting on the outside, which is nice for taste and texture. We then need to proceed to make the base of the souffle. This is sometimes known as a panada, and in many ways it's similar to that of a bechamel, a sweet bechamel. So we make a roux, and over the back we've got a little bit of milk scalding away, and that's flavoured with just a little bit of sugar to help the process. So we cook out the roux just for maybe 20 seconds or so, and then we slowly add on the milk. It's important that the milk is warm. If we add the milk without heating it, we cause lumps in the final product in the same way that will happen if you're making a bechamel sauce. So we just add a little bit of milk each time and then build it up, cooking it out. The end result's quite thick. It's similar really to choux pastry, or the panettone base that you have in choux pastry. You'll see in the next clip here. Once it's cooked out, we then need to take it out and place it in a bowl and flavour it with the required flavouring. In this case it's going to be some orange zest from before, and to that we add a little bit of alcohol, and in this case we're adding some Grand Marnier, but of course Cointreau would be just as fine to add to the souffle. We also add to that just a little bit of freshly squeezed orange juice, just add a little bit of freshness to it. And here comes the difficult part, which is just sort of mixing all of those ingredients together. You could do this in a pot, but you just run the risk of overheating the alcohol and losing some of that really lovely fresh flavour that it contains. But it could be done in the pot prior to this. And a lot like choux pastry and incorporating eggs, it's quite tricky to sort of mix it all up nice and even. It's important though that they're all well incorporated. After that's been mixed together, we need to look at incorporating the egg into the base. We do that by splitting a couple of eggs, keeping of course the egg whites separate in a clean whisking bowl, and we add the egg yolks to the panada mix. Adding the egg yolks will slightly loosen up the mix again and help us incorporate those egg yolks because it's quite thick right now. The problem is if we add the egg yolks too soon, we're actually going to cook some of the egg, and that's going to affect the rise later on and the setting of the souffle. So, but once again, if the panada is too cool, we'll have a small issue that we can't actually mix it in very thorough. So it's sort of that blood temperature is what we're looking for. So mixing in the egg yolk there till it's fully incorporated and nice and smooth. There you go. Now what we need to do is look at whisking up the egg whites. This will take just a couple of minutes. So this process up until this point can be done in a restaurant situation prior, and really it's just a matter of warming up our mix and adding our egg yolks and folding in the egg whites. We want to whip the egg whites to what we call a soft peak. We don't want them too firm. We want a soft peak so it's easy to incorporate into our souffle. What we then look at doing is, once we've got our soft peak, we add a little bit of sugar just to sweeten the mix and help it help the incorporation of the egg whites into the souffle. As you see, it doesn't take too long, but a little bit of effort is required. A balloon whisk is certainly advantageous. Okay, so we've got a soft peak, and now we're just folding in or whisking in lightly the caster sugar, and it's really ready to be incorporated into the souffle mix now, or into the base mix. Like most incorporations of egg whites, we add it in thirds, so gently folding it through. The first third can be, reasonably vigorous and a little bit rough, just loosening up the mix, but it's the last 2/3 that really count. That's where we get the lightness of the souffle and the lift that's required. You notice that turning over sort of folding technique, so capturing a little bit of air each time that we fold the base mix onto the egg white, and adding again the very last third of the egg white into the souffle base. It's a good rule of thumb, it's usually 1 egg per portion when preparing a souffle. There you go, folding it through, making sure it's all even and smooth. Notice the sort of lightness there of that mix. It's quite silky looking. Okay, now we're ready to fill the moulds, and it's important that we fill the moulds right to the top. You'll notice here, if you've made the recipe correctly, it'll come pretty much, you'll get 2 portions exactly out of this. Here we go, folding it over. Some people will smooth the top of the souffle with a palette knife, but if it's nice and smooth like this, you shouldn't really have to. There you go, well incorporated. Just clean up the sides of the souffle, because otherwise they'll just bake on in the oven, and you won't get that really nice white sort of ramekin look in the perfectly square-sided souffle. That's what we're looking for. Then placed into an oven at 200 degrees for somewhere around about 10 minutes, maybe 10 to 12 minutes. It's hard to know. Halfway through, you'll sort of see them starting to rise like so. You'll know they're fully cooked when you look at here. They've sort of almost doubled in size. They're golden on top. What we're going to do is take one out a little bit early, and it looks like it's cooked here. It's the right size. it's been in for what you think is the right amount of time, but really it's about 3 minutes short of how long it should be in. So if we just cut into it now, and you have a look with a little spoon, you'll see what it looks like on the inside of the souffle. See, it's just that little bit raw where the egg hasn't actually coagulated yet. So if you've left it in for the correct amount of time, which I'd recommend, say 12 minutes, you can always tell, you see that little bit of pulling away there at the sides of a souffle. It's a good sign. Take it out, and again, for presentation we need to dust it with icing sugar evenly over the top, and you just really got to try and pick it up with your tongs and use your fingers just briefly. You've got to have that napkin organised really for it, in the plate, and that's pretty much got a lifespan of about 3 minutes. If we cut in, you can see that it's cooked through, and just take a wee spoonful of it out just to show that that just perfectly cooked, soft centre, lovely and fluffy. Here's a shot coming up here of the souffle once it's finished. It really doesn't last very long, about 3 minutes before it begins to drop.